It's time we bring some sense to Studio B in the form of Uncle B, Blaine Fowler. Blaine, national champion quarterback. You've played in big games. You've called a ton of big games. Talk some sense into Brian. Please tell me that Arizona is not in your toughest 3 games.
It's not. It's not. Michigan State's my toughest game because it's on the road, and it's a true road game. Some of these other big games, Arizona is a neutral field, and you say, well, it's down by Arizona.
That's not neutral.
But BYU has more tickets sold already than they do.
Actually, you know what? Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's going to be as much a 50-50 game and maybe a 60-40 game for BYU. So that's a neutral game. It truly is, even though it's in Arizona. And then you go back to FedEx Field for the West Virginia game. It's a neutral game, but that's more of a home game for West Virginia. Their fans will travel up there, and they have great fans. But the true road game against an unbelievably physical football team is Michigan State. And I just think that Michigan State, year after year after year, is one of the most physical teams in the country. And we're going to see if BYU can hang up front. And that's one of my big question marks for BYU. How good are they going to be up front this year? That's the game that they're either going to get mauled or they're going to be just fine. And so it's a lot like that Michigan game on the road last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so that's the one to me that's the toughest. And then I agree, both of you I think have Boise State in your top 3.
Yep.
So I think Boise State on the road is my number 2 most tough game. Short week, and you've already documented the games that it follows.
Yep.
So short week after a tough schedule, they could be worn out at that point. And Boise State's got 9 of 11 starters returning on offense, an offense that produced over 600 yards in their bowl game. They just, at the end of the season, BYU played them early, and by the end of the season, they were killing it.
They were a totally different team.
They were a machine offensively. And all those parts and pieces are back, at quarterback, at running back. So that to me is number 2. And then number 3, oh gosh, that's a tough one. Maybe I put West Virginia there because it's a road game. And so I don't have Utah. I don't have Arizona. The reason I don't have Utah is, and we've talked about this earlier, if I look at Utah and I were to rank their best players from most important on down, they lose 6 of their first 8, including number 1, their punter.
Okay.
Yeah.
No Tom Hackett.
So their special teams, without question, in my mind, has been the best in the country.
Yeah.
Period, for the last 3 years.
Yep.
Great coaching on special teams, but when you have Hackett and you have Covey returning punts, and the way
Kalen Clay before that,
and so to me, they take a big dip in special teams. They're still going to be unbelievably well coached there, but talent-wise, you cannot replace those guys. That's a once-in-a-lifetime punter. He affected so many games. So I think he's their number 1 loss. Is that crazy?
Wow.
It's not the tailback.
Not Devontae Booker.
Yeah, that was one of the best in the league. It's not quarterback. But those 2 inside backers. So Norris is gone. I thought he was a tackling machine. Gianni Paul is gone. If you were rate 1 through 8, 6 of those 8 graduate, and that's why I think Utah. If BYU's going to beat Utah, this is the year they better do it.
Why not UCLA and Mississippi State?
Well, I like how much talent UCLA brings in, but UCLA's not played well on the road in the state of Utah. And I know that Rosen's going to be a sophomore. We'll see how he goes.
They lost 8 guys to the NFL.
So they were a really talented team last year that BYU hung with. So now they're coming on the road. Mississippi State, they'll be unbelievably talented. They don't maul you like Michigan State does. They beat you with speed. It'll be an interesting matchup. But on the road, at elevation, we're going to grow the grass really, really high that week.
Yes, please do.
I just feel like BYU's got a better shot at that game than they do on the road against
Mississippi
Michigan State.
Is coming off of a game against Auburn on Saturday. It's a short week, Friday game. They've got to make the 2 time zone travel, and they have already had, at that point in the season, they will have played South Carolina, LSU, and Auburn.
Right. But I'm still going to put Mississippi State 4th.
Yeah.
Right
above
behind West
UCLA.
Virginia. And then I'll put UCLA 5th.
And Utah 6th?
6th.
Wow. Brian, your number 1 game.
But here's the crazy part
Yeah.
about it. So I'm putting Utah 6th. That's a brutally tough game. That tells you. And that's why every publication that's coming out has got BYU's schedule as one of the 5 toughest in the country. That's why. Because we're talking about who I think is their 6th toughest matchup, and that team could beat BYU.
Yep.
So they better come with their A game every single week, and they better stay healthy.
Every week is championship week, man. That's what I love about college football. I love about being independent right there. But the downfall is the talent that you guys are playing, and I think that was my approach on how I rank these. And this may sound bad. I mean, I love BYU. We all know that, right? But it's just historically BYU struggles against top tier teams because of the talent. I think it has more to do with recruiting, has more to do with the speed on the other side and the size and the strength on the other side. And that's just naturally from, I would rather go to a Michigan State or a SEC school rather than a BYU, right? That's just the facts of life. And so with that being said, I'm already kind of scratching that off as like a loss. And so what are the winnable games? I think the winnable games are, the Utahs, the Boise States, the Arizonas. And so that's why I rank those, because now let's look at the games that are winnable, and then let's rank those.
The question was three toughest games.
You can beat Michigan State, but you're going to have to win the turnover margin battle. So some things are going to have to happen. If you just go and they play 100% and BYU plays 100%, they're likely going to lose on the road. So in a game like that, that's why you have upsets in college football. You go there and they turn the football over. You force turnovers. You capitalize on some things. You make a special teams play. All of a sudden, you're in the game and you win the game. The best team doesn't always win in college football games. Or why do we even play it, right?
Yeah,
we always talk about that. And so, can BYU win at Michigan State? Sure, they can. But they have to play extremely well and take care of the football. And Michigan State has turned over a few times. Hey, BYU in this losing streak to Utah, multiple times in this 5-game losing streak, has had better talent than Utah going into the game. There's years when BYU was favored and should have won.
2013.
And they turned the ball over at an unbelievable rate during that string. Yeah, 2013 is a perfect example. BYU should have spanked Utah based on talent that year. And they didn't because they turned it over. Now, so can that happen? Can BYU beat Michigan State? Sure they can. They've got to capitalize on Michigan State mistakes. They can't just play them straight up and go, well, hey, we're going to line up, we're going to run it at you, and then you guys line up and run it at us. We'll lose that every time.
This is fantastic. And so much so, I want to talk about the coaching staff with you, Blaine, but we're going to push that to next week, because this has started a whole train of thought for me with what BYU can accomplish, and specifically when you have a quarterback, not to mention two,
right?
What quarterback is going to have an advantage against Tanner Mangum or Taysom Hill this season?
So we're looking at who. So Rosen's going to come in from UCLA.
Is Josh Rosen as a sophomore better than Tanner Mangum or Taysom Hill?
He's not. He was comparable. You know what? If you just look at pure production in their freshman year, Rosen had better numbers than Tanner did last year. But he was the starter going into the season, got all the reps. They knew he was going to be the guy, so he started off. Now, BYU handled him pretty well. They confused the heck out of him as a freshman. And that's what happens to freshmen. BYU changed things up. They moved before the snap. They did all kinds of things to take advantage of the fact that he was a freshman. In fact, I think BYU played Rosen as well as anybody in the country played him last year. But as he got more and more seasoned, as the season progressed, he made fewer and fewer of the mistakes that he made against BYU. So he's coming in as a seasoned sophomore that got every rep going into the season last year. So he's probably a half a step ahead of Tanner. He's not ahead of Taysom, where Taysom was before he got hurt. Taysom, before he got hurt, going into that Nebraska game, was a veteran, senior, polished, 3-read, throw the ball on time quarterback. And Taysom's a guy that defenses, so when you're playing Josh Rosen, he's a drop back guy. As a defensive coordinator, you go, well, we're not designing anything specifically for Rosen. We have to be really, really sound in what we do. So here's their route combinations. We got to make sure we cover that. Here's the keys. This is what we do. But you don't go, we're going to change our defense for Josh Rosen. You play your defense, and you know that you've got to be unbelievably sharp or he kills you. Same thing when you're playing Luke Falk, Washington State's quarterback, losing my mind. That's what happens when you get over 50. But that's what happens. You guys, I was trying to remember what my name. I forgot it was Uncle B. I forgot.
Who's Uncle B? Where's he at? Where's that guy?
That drop back guys, you don't necessarily design a specific game for him. But I'm telling you right now, Taysom, when he's in the game, every D coordinator goes, okay, we got to change what we're doing this week. So we can't just play standard defense. Okay, pass rush. Defensive ends, don't run by him. That will just kill us. So don't be quite as aggressive. When you get even with the quarterback, now come parallel to him. Don't run by him. Don't let him step up. If you create a seam, he's going to run 75 yards for a touchdown. So we got to alter our pass rush. Tackles, don't get out of your lanes. You can't leave seams in the pass rush. So it limits the amount of pressure that you can put on him, because you've got to be really disciplined with what you do to not leave leaks to allow him to get out. And then defensively, you go, okay, Linebacker, you're just going to spy him. So we're not even going to put you in pass coverage. We're going to avoid a zone when we're playing zone, and you're going to cover him all the time. So if he does get out of the pocket, you're going to cover him. So he creates a whole set of problems. There's very few players in college football that every game they play in, the defense changes what they're doing to accommodate how talented that guy is. That's Taysom. So is there another quarterback that BYU has on their schedule where you change your game plan to play him?
No.
I can't think of one. I can't think of one.
So what, if we're going head-to-head with the quarterbacks, let's look at your 3 picks, and which team do you think BYU, from a talent perspective, matches up really well with? Head-to-head talent.
I think so we're talking about my top 3, and I think they match up well with Boise State. And I just worry that it's the short week.
On the blue on a Thursday is so scary.
They're so good at home. They're so confident. They play with a lot of swagger. Now, I'm not saying they can't go win that game because I believe they can. From a sheer talent perspective, they match up really well with Boise State. They do.
And so, but see, and that's my thing is that when you have those games where you have 5 turnovers, but then you have teams that have talent, and I mean they're sending guys, 10, 15 guys to the NFL within a 2-3 year span. They can overcome those 5 turnovers or 3 or those mistakes. Do you get nervous when it comes to the Michigan States? And she's smiling at me.
So no, I do get nervous about Michigan State because
point.
Michigan State can line up and just beat the crap out of you if they want to. They remind me of Stanford. Yep. It's like we're doing the Pac-12 South tour this year. I'm glad we're not doing the North with Washington and Stanford and Oregon. Yeah, it's those guys. I was at Stanford's practice on Monday night this week watching them. And I was thinking, hey, how would BYU match up with these guys? And I look at them up front, and I'm going, man, they got a bunch of maulers up there. Yeah. You know, I look at the other positions, and I'm going, you know, BYU matches okay with these guys. I'm looking around, and then I watch Christian McCaffrey catch a couple of punts and run. I'm like, oh, okay, well, they don't have that guy. They don't have that guy. Right. But so I look at Stanford, and I watch them very closely because my son-in-law plays there. And then I look at Michigan State, and I go, oh, Michigan State's like Stanford. They are so big and so physical up front. They're too deep at every position on the offensive line and the defensive line. Somebody goes down, they put another guy in that's just as good, only he's 2 years younger. Yep. And BYU's got to get to that point. And here's what I think happens. Are they going to be at that point this year? No, because this is the start of Kalani and this group and Mike Empey recruiting linemen and where I think Kalani changes BYU's ability to recruit big guys up front. Yep. They're going to put an emphasis on it again. The big Polynesian players, they can get to the NFL just as easily out of BYU as they can out of Oregon or Stanford or Michigan State for that matter. Yep. And so over the next 2 to 3 years, BYU is going to be too deep at every position on the offensive line and too deep at every position on that defensive line. They're going to be producing NFL offensive linemen. Then you go, I'm not worried about them going to Michigan State because they can match up with Michigan State's strength, and Michigan State can't pound them and knock them off the ball. They can't collapse them on the defensive line, knocking BYU's offensive line back so they can't run the football. And now BYU takes care of the ball, they're in the game. Yep. Right now, I think they're good with their starters, but they don't have the kind of depth to be able to match up every single week with Michigan State.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, this is fascinating stuff. This is how we make the time pass during the offseason as we break down the schedule and the 3 toughest opponents and how BYU matches up. But, okay, that's not to say we want to specifically discuss how this new staff impacts BYU next week with you.
Yeah, this offensive staff, we'll give them a tease for next week. You have to have a puzzle. This puzzle, when I look at it, fits so perfectly together. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised at how the individual pieces on this offensive coaching staff blend to make what I think is one of the best fits in college football.
Wow! How about that? Up next, why aren't Mississippi State and UCLA in our top 3 toughest games?